We are pleased this evening to have Chief CIRA and folks from the police department to talk about the partnership between the school system and the police department and the services they provide. And this is somewhat of a little bit unique in that all school districts and communities do not have that close of a relationship, and there are many things that they can do, that we can do, that others are unable to do, and they sit in awe of the partnership that we've developed over time. Mr. Holt is going to begin the presentation, followed by Chief CIRA and his folks.
Chairman Edwards, Vice Chair Brunke, school board members, and Dr. Magula, the Department of School Division Services and the Office of Safety and Loss Control are pleased to have Virginia Beach City Police Chief Jim CIRA here this afternoon to present a workshop on the collaborative efforts of the Virginia Beach City Public Schools and the public safety employees of Virginia Beach. Chief CIRA.
Thank you. First, we would like to thank you for having us today. We think we have a lot of good information to put out. Prior, though, I'd like to introduce Deputy Chief Tony Zuccaro. Deputy Chief Zuccaro commands the Operations Division. The Operations Division is basically, as we refer to it, anyone who wears a blue suit. So anyone who wears a uniform comes under the Operations Division. With him is Sergeant Shannon Wichendall. She's his aide, and Shannon is very heavily engaged in all of our school initiatives that we have. Before I get started, many times when you get a presentation, you will hear what an organization does, and then you will hear how the organization does it. We feel that the most important question that needs to be answered first is why. Why do we dedicate 30 police officers to our city schools every day, full-time? Why are they dedicated to a specific school? And the answer is really very simple. Our police department is way beyond the law enforcement methodology or model of policing. We realize that we go way beyond cops and robbers, and our police agency is an agency of social change. And we do that very effectively in our communities. We also realized over the years that what happens in a community will eventually find itself in a school. And what happens in the school will eventually find itself back in the community. So the why that we dedicate ourselves to the school system is we realize that, first and foremost, kids are our top priority. And secondly, from an economic development standpoint, whenever a business decides to look to move to Virginia Beach, they ask two questions, usually in this order or reverse order. What are your schools like, and how safe is the community? Well, we realize those two tie in together. That's the why of what we do. A little bit about our philosophy. The history of the School Resource Officer Program goes back to 1994-95. Prior to that, we did not have a School Resource Officer Program. We responded to schools when needed. And to be very honest, principals very rarely called for the police to come on their campus. They handled most of the situations themselves. We came up with the idea of having permanent full-time school resource officers, and to be very honest, it met with a little bit of resistance because it was new, it was different, and the question was constantly asked, do we need to have cops in our schools? And the answer at that time was no, but why wait? So we started our SRO program with 13 initial officers. They covered both high schools and middle schools. We worked from there to have full-time officer in every high school, every middle school in this city, and that includes 2 officers permanently assigned to the Renaissance Academy. Those officers had the full support of the police department and the full support of the school administrators. And that's very important because while they work in the schools and they're part and parcel of the school administration, they're still cops, and they do that cop thing that they have to do sometimes in the school, which means if it means arresting a student, that's what they will do. Most of the time it doesn't rise to that level because many of our students now walk into the middle school. There's an SRO permanently assigned to the middle school, and at that tender young age of 6th grade, they kind of grow up seeing a police officer and understanding what that police officer is there for. It's very important for those young children to understand that. Excuse me. And when I say the full support of the police department, if there is a criminal violation in the school, around the school, on a school bus, at a school bus stop, they have the full support of the investigative division, the forensic unit. They have the full support of the administration of the police department. So it is a full service police officer that we put out on the street. Also, I want you to know that these police officers work in the precincts. They come to the muster every day, they get all the crime reports, and remember, if you have a school X, and there's an issue that goes on around the school, that SRO knows about it. And you know, they clear a lot of cases. We had a case, one of the celebrated cases a few years ago where we had a shooting, not on the campus, it was in the neighborhood, and the person who put the entire case together was the SRO. Because that SRO was given a street name of a kid. She knew exactly who that was. He wasn't involved in it, but he knew who was. He spoke to the SRO brought in the detectives, and eventually we were able to clear a school shooting that did not happen on the campus, but in the neighborhood next to the campus. So that's very important that these SROs know what the crime issues are. And it's very important that they work out of the precinct, and it's very important that they have the full support of the entire police department. And you know, if that means on occasion we will have to bring in a drug dog, we'll have to bring in a canine, we do that. We also know that at some of our special events, if we have to use our mounted squad, that's not an issue. I'll get into that a little bit later, but they have the full support of the entire police department. Our SROs are mentors. I kind of alluded to that earlier, but they really are. They're in the school, they realize some kids are just teenagers doing that teenage stuff that they do, and the officer then becomes a mentor. But the students understand, if I cross the line, this mentor will become the police officer, and I will have to abide by what that police officer says. All of our SROs have a deep community connection, and in our police department, we are 100% dedicated to our community, because our community is what will solve our problems in our city. And finally, in our philosophy, a lot of it has to do with putting a cop in school. But we also are very serious about traffic safety in and around schools. Our 4 full-time motorcycle officers really, every morning, they're out on the street, and every morning they start with school zones, and they work very heavily in those school zones because we understand the safety in and around the schools. As I stated, we have 28 school resource officers, 11 are dedicated to high schools, 14 are dedicated to the middle schools, and if you do your math, that leaves us 3 left. And we have officers assigned to the Renaissance Academy, and then we have officers that, what we call our floaters. You know, I said earlier in the beginning, in the early days, we had some pushback and resistance from certain school principals. They did not want a police officer in the school. Well, today, if that police officer takes 2 days of vacation, the principal's on the phone to the precinct, direct connection, and it's usually, where's my cop? And we will have someone there, because the principals realize the importance of having that police officer. Our SROs teach Virginia law safety aspects. They teach the overview of the entire judicial system. We don't want them to be full-time instructors in the classes, but they are. We don't want them to be full-time hall monitors, but occasionally we'll do that. In other words, they work part and parcel with the school administration. We're heavily involved in certain key programs, one of which is every 15 minutes. If you've ever seen the every 15 minutes program, it is absolutely phenomenal. It's a high energy for the police department, and we have to dedicate a lot of resources to it, but we feel it's important because DUI crashes in our city are always very high, and fatalities based on DUI is also high in our city. 2 years ago, I challenged one of our high schools, Salem High School, Dr. Robertson, and we challenged them outright. We made them part of the system. When we did the every 15 minutes program, we challenged them. We said, start a petition. Your petition, respectfully written, should tell the chief of police that he needs to do a better job with DUI enforcement. And if you get enough kids, if you get enough students to sign this petition, you will go before council, and I will have to answer to council. Well, sure enough, Salem High School did it, and then they took that idea and they transported it over to Lansdowne High School, and we had over 2,000 students sign the petition, and we were in front of city council. They then became part of the system. We're heavily involved in Drive Safe Hampton Roads. Anything that has to do with kids driving, we are heavily involved in, including texting while driving. We have another program where we have what we call the fatal vision goggles. We put them on, they simulate being DUI, and then we tell the kids to do certain activities, and by and large they can't. Well, it's a lot of fun, they laugh at each other, but some young people get the idea. You think you could do things better after you've had alcohol, and you cannot. In our city, we have a very robust gang initiative. All of our SROs are trained. We have an online gang training initiative provided to all school employees that came out of our Special Investigations Division. We're very happy that all school employees have taken this. And what these initiatives really hone in on is the identification of potential gang members. That doesn't mean that a kid who walks down a hall with a swagger and a white t-shirt is automatically but a gang member. But there are some situations that arise where if we can get to the student quickly and we can divert them out of the problem, then we've saved a lot of resources rather than dealing with the problem. We're heavily involved, and we'll get into the CIRA training very shortly, but we were heavily involved in what we call active shooter training sessions. And we really want to thank the school system, especially Dale Holt, Danny England, and Dick Ponte for helping us with this. Dr. Magul alluded earlier that not many cities have this kind of cooperative effort. And we do. Not many cities could go to their school administrators and say, we want to use your school when you're not in session, and we're going to set up a shooting scenario. Most people say, no, you're not going to set up a shooting scenario. We don't even want to think about it. But we did. And the way we did this, we didn't even tell the police officers that they were heading to a training evolution. We just took them out of muster. We sent them to whatever elementary or middle school it was, and we set up the training from there. They came, they went through the schools. We had hundreds of people involved. All the officers went through it, and then we finished it up with what we call our CIRA training. And I will get to that in a moment. And we don't do this in a vacuum. We work very, very closely with the Department of Administrative Support Services. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about, especially for special events, came about over just a conversation as to how can we do something better. In other words, there really are not individual smokestacks. We're really all in this together. And I think we have, over the years, developed this kind of relationship where we can sit across the table, disagree or agree. We can laugh. We can come to the end result, and we could say, why are we doing this? What we want to do is make our students safer. We want to make our citizens safer when they attend some after-school activities, and so we work towards that end goal. We now have broached out to where officers and supervisors are voluntarily signing up to patrol some of the elementary school areas in our city. First Precinct has taken the initiative of this. Captain Dennis Santos has done a fantastic job. Officers are signing up to say, while I'm working and I'm not doing anything else, I will be at elementary school X. We like that because no one knows when they're going to show up. No one knows when they're going to be there or how long they're going to be there. Sometimes two will show up. Sometimes a supervisor will come with the officer. Sometimes an officer will come by himself. We're not going to give out the trade secret as to what times we're going to be at what schools, but we do understand the importance of our officers at those elementary schools. And officers from both day and evening shifts now are signing up for this because we know that your schedule and our schedule are not exactly in sync, and that if you have an after-school activity, that goes into the evening division, evening shift, and those officers will be at the schools. We do a lot of work with principals in service, not only in emergency planning. I will get into the CIRA exercise shortly, but we work very heavily with our principals. We understand that is the contact. That is the point of contact. That is where the rubber meets the road between the police department and the individual principals. We have a similar system in that our precinct captains have a lot of autonomy in their precincts, and we understand the same system is in place, site-based management in the schools. So we are very happy that every summer we do a principals in service. The CIRA exercise that we're going to talk about, can you go to the next slide real quick? Come back. And we will talk in more depth about CIRA in a few minutes. The CIRA exercise, if you remember, we took a school and we did a full-blown exercise of what we call an active shooter. We had some 300 participants at the school. we had police, fire, and rescue, because that's who's going to respond to a school situation. We had recruits from the police department and from the sheriff's department act as role players. They were students, they were administrators, we did have the school administrators on scene, we had our own role players as the bad guys. And we responded, again, it was not announced ahead of time to the officers responding that this is an exercise. They didn't know it until they got on scene. We flew in helicopters to take out individuals. We brought in fire trucks. We brought in bomb-sniffing dogs. We did a complete, full exercise as we would if this, God forbid, was an actual event. We had some 300 people involved. We took away from it a lot of knowledge, what we did right, what we didn't do so right, and what we're going to plan on to do better in the future. One of the things I want to talk about is our major events. A couple of years ago at your high school football games, we had officers working high school football games, and there was not a lot of command and control from our end, and there was not a lot of coordination of scheduling from the school's end. Sometimes 4 officers would show up. Sometimes nobody would show up. And so we got together with Dick Ponte, Danny England, and we came up with a system whereby 2 of our lieutenants have decided they will be the permanent schedules for all high school football games. And the beauty behind this is, remember, a police lieutenant can get on the radio and call any support service they need from the police department. So sometimes we'll have a football game and the request will be made, can we have mounted there? Most of the time mounted is there just as a show, because we're not going to have that big of a problem. But we'll have a couple of mounted officers there. Or we'll bring in some extra officers from a precinct. We'll do extra traffic control. Whatever we need to do to make sure that football game goes off without a problem, we aim to coordinate those events. And it's worked. We took that idea that we had, and then we transported it to high school graduations. And you did your graduations this year for 4 days, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 days, 3 graduations a day. It was a machine at the conference center. Previous years, we had off-duty officers, and we looked at that, and the police department really took control of how we work high school graduations at the convention center. That does not mean that we're going to be at every event that the schools will have, but we realize the importance of thousands of parents and thousands of students walking in and out of that convention center with the understanding that we're going to provide safety and security. The coordination worked impeccable this year. We had, if we had a communications plan, we had an emergency plan, we had an evacuation plan, we had a plan for everything. And we feel that it worked really well. We're going to take that idea and we look at other events that the school system has, because again, we realize that we don't have hundreds of kids in our school system, we have thousands. Our SROs are trained in what we call CIT, crisis intervention. I can get into that very extensively, but here's the bottom line. CIT has been designed to take an individual that's having some kind of psychotic mental episode and divert them from a criminal justice system into the mental health system. And it's working fantastically with the officers dealing with individuals on the street. Officers will come upon an individual who's committed a minor crime, and rather than have that work into a physical arrest, and then a physical arrest goes to what we call bad places, because an individual then is going to resist, and we have people injured and people hurt. We realize CIT training, the officers can identify a psychotic episode and are given the training to try and get that person into a rational state to get them diverted into the mental health system. We have taken this idea and given it to all the SROs. No, they're not psychologists. They're not psychiatrists. But you know, if they could take a few students and understand what the student is going through, and then divert that student to a mental health system, or at least get them into a situation where we reduce the potential of violence, it's to our benefit. This has been working for all of our officers. The younger officers really like this program. They use a lot of verbal skills, and again, we have now transported it into all of our SROs. We believe in preventing crime rather than responding to crime. We believe in conducting the security assessments ahead of time rather than on the backside of conducting those security assessments. We've done this Last year, we're going to continue it this year. Princess Anne Elementary School has tomorrow, I believe. Today. Is having their assessment being completed, and we're going to resume them in September. We also have a very robust Crime Solvers program in some of our schools, and we're going to try and get that involved in all the high schools and all the middle schools, where if a student sees a crime, they don't have to run directly into the principal's office and say, I saw so-and-so do whatever. We have a Crime Solvers program that can do this anonymously. So we're going to promote that very heavily this year. Again, our CIRA exercise, and we just want to show a little clip of what we did in the CIRA exercise. We did have 300 participants, and again, I've kind of gone over everybody who was there. By the way, we did have some of our folks from Homeland Security on scene to observe what we were doing, and they wanted us to put together a video as to everything that we were able to accomplish that day. What we're going to show is the first minute of the video, just to give you an idea of what this video will include.
I need some help right away. I was in the office and I heard some noise at the front door. Two guys came in, they shot my security guard. I'm trying to hide right now, and they've chained the front doors. I need some help right away. Lansdowne Elementary. I've got students in the building. Somebody help me, please.
Okay, so are you with the security guard who was shot?
I don't know. He is a security guard. We have a security guard. He said, hang on a minute. No, sir, no. Holy.
This was the largest full-scale event anywhere in the state. We've been contacted by other agencies throughout the state to see if they can replicate it. We've been contacted by folks up and down the East Coast to see if they also can replicate this particular program. This exercise that we did, and again, this wasn't going to happen if we did not have, and I don't want to say the working relationship, because a working relationship means you kind of do things separately and come together. Folks, we're all in this together, from the police standpoint, from the city standpoint, and from the school standpoint. On a personal note, I've always said, if we can educate kids, we don't have to incarcerate adults. So I put a lot of responsibility back on Dr. McGool and our educators to make sure that our jails are empty. And we have any questions?
Mr. Reed. I'd just like to commend you guys on the active shooter event that y'all put together with us. I was there that day over in the school plant building with the security guys and watched the whole thing from all the different cameras that they had going on. You guys are just incredible in your actions and the way you put together everything to resolve it. It was really very impressive, and very proud of what you guys did. Thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate that comment, and again, we've done an after-action report to see what went well, what didn't go as well as we wanted. We made some changes on our end, and I couldn't stay in the school plant.
You had to be everywhere.
I was in the school, and I was on the phone continuously with the deputy chief asking questions, and he turned his phone off after a while. So, thank you, sir.
Good job.
Ms. Holtz.
Thank you. The 25 police officers that are chosen for the schools, how are they chosen? And my real question is, do they rotate that? Do they choose to, is that their career?
No.
Okay.
Officers volunteer. We just don't pick individuals, because there's some individuals who are better with working with young people and other individuals who aren't. They have to volunteer. If a school resource officer position comes open, they will put their memos of interest in within their precinct, or sometimes other precincts will say we have an SRO opening to just pick a school, Princess Anne High School. That's not their career. They stay there for a period of time, and then we like to move them. We like to move them back out into the precinct. We like to bring other officers in. We find that it's a very good assignment for a police officer to see something totally different than what they're accustomed to seeing, and so they get a broader experience.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor?
I would just like to commend you and Mr. Ponte's team. You all do a wonderful job of working together. And as a former school principal, elementary school, I was able to reach out and get an SRO over in, 10 minutes if I had some kind of, minor incident, and you all were there to support. So it has come a long ways, and I think that the schools really appreciate what you do, and thank you for what you do.
Well, I appreciate that. I will take that compliment to the captains of the precincts, because again, that's where that job gets done, and they understand the importance of the schools.
Mr. Brunke?
Just a couple of quick notes. One, having had students who are currently in high school and recently graduated high school, I know in hearing them talk about the SRO at school, it was always talked about in a very positive, nurturing way. They viewed the SRO as part of the school staff, but did understand why they were there. And it was a great working relationship, as you say, a partnership that you have. The kids come home and they talk to their parents about it, and it's good stuff. And I know that as a parent, before I was ever on this board, I felt good knowing that relationship was there, and that rapport with the student was there, and you alluded to some of the other benefits of that as well. The other thing that I thank you for is we get calls from folks a lot, and they ask us, what are you doing about school safety? And they'll usually have a long list of things that they think they should be doing. And it's very comforting to be able to reply by telling them that I'm not in the business of law enforcement protecting our schools. We have a wonderful relationship with local law enforcement, our police department, and together we do that. And it doesn't fall on us as a school system alone. While we have certainly wonderful people that are on that side from the school side, it's the relationship with you that really perfects what we do. And it's very comforting, particularly after, we got a lot of calls after the things that happened in Connecticut this past summer. And I felt very confident in telling them that I felt good about what we do and what we were doing, and knew full well that I'm sure seconds only passed before you all started thinking about the things that you may need to think about in connection with our schools. And as a parent and as a board member, I thank you all for that.
Ms. Williams?
Yes, also as a parent and board member, I thank you for that too. And I agree with Mr. Brunke about the personal relationship in that building. I know that every 15-second program is great, and there's been so much, as my kids have gone through the schools, so much emphasis on the drinking and driving, and now texting and driving, which is great. But I guess my question, and maybe I would look forward to meeting with you, privately to discuss this too, is, with the drug issue, and I know we talked about this at our retreat, because if you go to any NA meeting or AA meeting throughout the city, they will tell you that drugs are in our schools. And, when we used to think growing up, we went to keg parties, or some of my sisters and brothers went to keg parties. But, that was the big deal. And now it's like, and even my 28-year-old can say it's so different now, because you talked about, oh my gosh, pot in schools, and then, different drugs and cocaine, and now it's heroin. And, and I think it's a reality that we have to look at. I'm not sure where the school system fits in there, because, and so what is your take briefly on the drug issue here in this area, and how much it's getting in our schools? Because again, this is what I'm hearing from young people, that drug deals are happening in schools, drugs are in our buildings.
Well, I can tell you that from the number of cases that we work, drugs are everywhere.
Right.
And it's becoming almost an accepted thing in our society. You watch TV, and there'll be a sitcom, and they laugh about it, so everybody kind of laughs about this issue. The best thing that we can do, from an enforcement perspective, we do what we can in a school. Remember, even though we are in a school with a school administrator, there are still things that we have to deal with, such as constitutional issues. When is the right to search? When can we seize something? When can we talk to a student? When is it improper to talk to a student? And the SROs are very good at that. The SROs are also very good because they'll get information from other kids as to who's carrying what. Trust me. But again, drugs in our society are everywhere. We have to deal with it in the schools. We have to deal with it after school events. We have to deal with it with kids keeping certain things in their car and doing it once they get outside. I think the real answer to that comes from the coordination from home. Whether or not parents are being in. One of the reasons why we did our the big gang initiative a few years ago, where we actually had 800 people show up at the convention center. And by the way, that would not have happened if the schools hadn't agreed to send the letters out. You know, when we knew the high school letters didn't go anywhere, some of the middle school letters got home, but the elementary kids bring everything home. And so we had 800 people at that meeting. And what we tried to do is educate parents what to look for. And I think that's the real key. I think the real key is to educating. We've been educating kids for a number of years, and we will continue to do that about drugs. But it's really educating the parents what to look for, what not to look for. And so I just think it's a continued cooperative effort between the school administrator, the SRO, and the parents.
Mr. Tenka?
Thank you. I echo the sentiments shared by my colleagues. As a former assistant Commonwealth attorney, I had personally prosecuted many of the crimes that you had mentioned, especially plaguing some of our schools, more so than others in other jurisdictions. But with that in mind, I was wondering, is there any cooperative effort regionally to work with other jurisdictions with respect to any forms of gangs and gang violence? As you know that gangs see no borders when it comes to the cities, that they can go from one city to the next.
Absolutely. Bad guys don't understand jurisdictional boundaries. And my colleagues from other cities and I constantly talk, and we always would say, can you keep them on your side of the Wayside Bridge, please? And the bad guys go back and forth. And so we do work very closely with the other cities. Not only our two neighboring cities, Chesapeake and Norfolk, we work very closely with all the regional cities. There's a regional task force that works out of the FBI. We have, obviously, the task force for gangs. We have a task force for drugs. But the other one is violent crime. And so we work very heavily with other jurisdictions. Technology has been fantastic because no longer do we have to meet and discuss. We have all the information we need at our fingertips. We could tell you if somebody's been arrested and stopped in Newport News based on some of the computer programming that we have. So the answer to that question is we work very closely with all of our colleagues throughout the region.
Anybody else? I appreciate your mentioning the Crime Solver program. I sit on that board, and I'd say virtually every month one of our rewards goes to somebody within one of the schools. And cases range from arson to guns and knives to theft, some assault. I mean, and nowadays a kid does not have to go to the principal, go to the assistant principal or anything. He can send a text message to the crime line, and that ends up through the detective bureau back to the SRO. And it gets handled. And as I say, and all those things I mentioned, those are cases that were actually solved. I mean, the ones that aren't solved don't come to the board for rewards. But, and the culture of collaboration goes just, you know, didn't even get mentioned. You know, we don't, whenever we set walking zones, you know, we would never do that in a vacuum. I mean, when, you know, traffic engineering and police, as well as our Safe Schools people, will sit down and say, okay, what can we do? We need to get little Johnny walking a little further, a little more every day, but where can you do it safely? And again, it's the collaboration is pervasive, thank goodness, and we certainly appreciate it. So,
well, sir, just as one final thought,
please do.
We have 4 precinct captains. They are the ones who will solve any problems within their precinct boundaries. The beautiful thing is the community of Green Run is separated by 2 precincts, and those 2 captains are in sync. If there's an issue, I don't care what side of the street it's on, you 2 are going to solve that problem. And they're very, very adept at doing that. And The deputy chief has been putting them in that direction for the last few years. So if there's an issue in any of the schools, it goes to that precinct captain, and I guarantee that they're going to solve that individual problem. From my perspective, I've always said it's very easy to be the chief in this city because we do have such a great police department. We have officers that do a fantastic job, and we also have such a great outreach effort from the city into the school system and from the schools back to the city. So we would like to thank you for all your support you also give us. Thank you.